Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets. Happy Thursday. Today's Thursday, April 17th. Boy, we had a great webinar yesterday. I'm grateful for all of you who attended. It's been our most widely attended webinar in the company's history, which is just awesome. I was thinking about this. One of the big stories that I normally would be talking about that I haven't had a chance to even touch on is that the Trump administration announced a $1 trillion defense budget for next year. Biggest defense budget in history. And I am so excited about this because this is the critical decade, ladies and gentlemen. This is the critical decade vis-a-vis us and China. This is the critical decade. So much is dependent on what happens in this next 10-year period of time. Basically, the world that my kids, grandkids, etc., grow up in is going to be based in large part on what happens in this decade. And it's interesting, the company that we talked about in yesterday's webinar, the robotics firm, they have a contract with the Air Force. Can you just imagine a conflict breaks out in the South China Sea, robot arms moving, loading docks, positioning things quickly? This is the type of company that we're talking about. This is a very serious kind of opportunity here, not only for the defense industry, which I'm going to be talking about more in the coming weeks, but it's also a big opportunity for domestic manufacturing that's coming back to America, that's being reshored in the pharmaceutical industry, and of course with technology, with NVIDIA and all these other companies announcing big manufacturing commitments here in the United States. And I was thinking about this too. Where are advantages that we as individual investors have in the markets? You don't have a math advantage because anybody could do math on what these companies are worth and look at PEs and all this other stuff. Institutional investors actually have teams of analysts that are doing math. You don't have a real advantage there. They could throw more resources at it than you can. You do have a big advantage when the markets crash, an emotional advantage if you keep your cool. Now, it don't matter how many institutional investors are out there. There are very few institutional investors that can keep their cool under pressure. And isn't that true? Pressure, it changes everything. Some people fold under pressure. And I'll tell you something, half of the people, more than half of the people that I've met on Wall Street, big shots, they fold under pressure, they panic. They're just not emotionally wired to handle crashes in the stock market. It's a disposition. Who knows why? It's psychological. Who knows? They just have a disposition that makes them get very anxious and panic and kind of blow a fuse when things get bad in the stock market. The other area that retail and individual investors like us have an advantage is in the private markets, which is what we talked about in yesterday's webinar. Again, in the public markets, you are competing with hundreds of institutional investors that have hundreds of analysts working at each of these shops, all of them doing math simulations on all these little companies in their portfolios, et cetera, et cetera. But in the private markets, you really don't have that. So it's like you against other investors. It's a much more fair game of poker, for lack of a better word. It's a much more fair game because you got to just handicap the other people at the table. You're not sitting around there with people who can count cards. And when you're dealing with institutional investors, they can pretty much count cards. So yesterday, we talked about two companies in our webinar. One of them, of course, is this robotics firm, which I happen to personally love the most. And the other one was a NVIDIA-backed company backed by Gates, NVIDIA, that everybody else seems to love a lot. But autonomous vehicle company that's doing really great stuff, actually. But my personal favorite, I can actually see the robotics. I can actually visualize how this robotics company is going to be used on manufacturing floors and in the military. I can really clearly see how important that is. I can also see how it'll save companies and the military more money than the alternatives on the market, than its competitors. So I see a very big future. And my friend Harold texted me yesterday saying to me, this is also a takeover target. He's 100% right. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most likely scenario. Let's be honest. This is a company that's very well positioned. And remember, it closes in days. So make sure you haven't gotten yourself a little slice of this company, a little slice of this pie. Please Do it as soon as you can. I already did it myself. I'm an investor too. Anyway, that's all I have for this Thursday. Have a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow.